Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Genius Live class. I'm your host, Dr. Deborah Drake, and I wanted to welcome all of our guests here today. We're going to keep jumping down onto the clinical pearls, tips, and strategies on how to use the Genius program. And I'd like to sort of continue our little lecture series on sound frequencies and voice bioacoustics and how you can actually benefit from using some of these technologies to get your coaching clients and yourself into the best bioterrain shape of your life. Now, we've been talking about bioterrain components in the last couple of weeks, and I'd like to focus today on the circulation part of the equation. So we've been talking a little bit about acid-base balance, and in order to maintain a holistic health status, you have to maintain healthy organ cushion, and your organs are basically cushioned up with oxygen, which keeps them from falling into acidosis. So I just wanted to recap a couple of the slides we had last week because we kind of blitzed over it a bit near the end. The ionic structure of minerals does have some acid minerals, some neutral minerals, some alkaline minerals across an electromagnetic spectrum, which we call the periodic table of elements. And this defines whether a mineral is a donor or a receiver or just a neutral conduit. And the pH of the body tells you whether there's hydrogen positive protons available to jump onto those minerals to either acidify them or neutralize them. And one of the more important ones in the body is the bicarbonate mineral, hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Water plus carbon dioxide makes bicarbonate, which is a very alkaline pH 14 molecule, and when it's mixed with acid, it comes to neutral in the middle and usually keeps you in good pH control. So you have to have both the acidity and the alkalinity, but the blood tends to remain in the neutral pH control range, okay? So there's only a 7.35 to 7.45 pH tolerable range in the blood as a very, very narrow range for ideal oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, which allows for the grabbing of the iron onto the oxygen, or oxygen onto the iron rather, and then the release of that oxygen into the tissues. And this is based on the gradient of carbon dioxide wastes that want to leave the cell. So the more acidic a cell, the more it's craving oxygen, the more it'll grab the oxygen and dump off the carbon dioxide. So I'm not sure how I got that little green streak on my slide there. So we go back to our original talk about bioterrain as the buffer, our aquarium, if you will. And if oxygen likes to stay in the center there at 7.4 pH, then that's the area where your oxygen is going to be the most ideal for giving and taking. If you're already very, very far into the acid zone or you're very far into the alkaline zone, the oxygen will not be able to have a gradient to travel along. So this is why it's very important for you to understand that the amperage of the body, how bright is your bulb, how happy is your personality, these are almost always related to how much oxygen is sitting in the center of all your cells. And if you stray off that oxygen, you get cranky or you get tired or you get miserable or you get diseased, one way or the other, you're going to have consequences for anybody who's having difficulties in that arena. I'm just going to admit all in the room there, if you don't mind having a peek on those admissions there for me. So this is important. Remember last time we talked about the pumping pressure is the voltage, right? How much water is pumping up and down from your heart and through your vessels. The amperage is how much oxygen is in that pumped blood. And then next week, we're going to be talking in greater detail about the resistance or the minerals that are required to accept all those donors, okay? These oxygen donors. Now remember that every animal in the entire world has the same minerals as us, the same amino acids, the same fatty acids, the same oxygen delivery systems. So what I'm talking about here is the exact reproduction of everybody in the world has that same important need for oxygen as the frequency of all of life. And I would like to remind you that if you look at this picture of oxygen, look how shiny it is, right? It actually glows with a vibration of light. So when oxygen is very pink and your blood is in the arteries, it's very pink with light. When you lose the oxygen out of the blood, it turns into a darker blood, which is the venous blood, and it looks blacker. Now you'll be able to see people of very darkness under the eyes. Their blood is coming back from the liver, very acidic and very dark indeed. Oops. So let me just kind of, I know I don't want to go too crazy on the acidosis and alkalosis, but this is really critical to you guys understanding why you're even in the bioenergetic world. What is it that we're delivering when we deliver genius or electricity into the body? We're delivering hydrogen, okay? That's electrons. And the electrons are going to fill in whatever seat in the bus is empty, okay? So there's various body compartments that hold us at different optimal pHs and acid-base levels based on where they are. The oxygen in the middle for the bloodstream likes this very narrow range of 7.35 to 7.45 for the survival range, okay? You know, if you come into my emergency room, as I've been a merge doc in the past, and people's pH was 7.2, they're in deep water. If their pH goes down to 7 or 6.9, they die. And this is why. Actually, if I could just go back, I just forgot to mention that the acidosis of the body is from the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, okay? And then the lung relates to the oxygen carbon dioxide acid, as does the pancreas and the kidney. They deal with spitting out acids for you, okay? The hydrochloric acid in the stomach releases renin angiotensin hormone that tells your adrenals, hey, I'm eating, start absorbing minerals. I'm loving all these food that's coming down the pipe. Then the pancreas says, wait, not so far. If I have all that hydrochloric acid coming down and burning my stomach, I'm going to have a leaky gut or an ulcer. So the pancreas squirts a big bicarbonate soda water, and it squirts 7 ounces of soda water for every cup of coffee you drink. So if you're drinking a cup of coffee, you're wasting 7 ounces of bicarb that was needed for the next 7 hours of digestion. Now, when the kidney gets all the acid coming out, it starts secreting bicarbonate, like an alkaline again, to reduce the acidity of all the acids from the proteins that are coming out through your kidneys as urine, urea, which is an acidic, or sorry, urea is actually slightly alkaline at 7.45, I believe. And so what I'm trying to point out here is that if you have control of your acids, meaning your protons and proteins, and they're charged up with enough light, they're going to have a good acid storehouse. And if you have good care of your pancreas and your kidneys, which secrete bicarbonate along with the lungs, then you can blow off or gas off or urinate out or get rid of these negative acids and neutralize them so that they can leave the body. And most poisons do not leave the body in an acid state or an alkaline state. Almost all poisons have to be neutralized to the 0.7.0 before they can flow through your arteries. And out into your capillaries and out of you and through the cell walls. So I want you to look at this graph here. See where oxygen starts coming up in myoglobin muscle. Once it's used up in the muscle, it's gone. The hemoglobin in the arteries is a slightly different curve, but still very, very steep in fetal hemoglobin, where you have a super high attraction to oxygen in the fetus. And then when you're born, you lose the fetal hemoglobin and you have hemoglobin A for adults. Now look at still, it's only a very narrow of pressure before you're already run out of it, okay? Meaning that the amount of oxygen per what we call the specific oxygen in your bloodstream has to be very well high up there to get the delivery, and it drops rapidly when you're back in the tissues that are starving for oxygen. So you can check this out like I talked to you last week. Take some litmus paper and see if you can actually check out, you know, whether or not you have the proper pH in your gut or your mouth, okay? Secondly, you need to have, whoever's just come on, would you mind muting yourself? Since hemoglobin is made of iron and protein, you also need zinc and copper, cobalt, manganese, iodine in the bone marrow. And these are the oxygen transition metals that carry oxygen the most in terms of a back and forth exchange. So it's not just being low in iron that could cause trouble. You need these other cofactors and co-minerals that help the bone marrow actually even produce the red blood cell in the first place. And oxygen, which is 54 hertz, memorize that, is always in a narrow range of hemoglobin and a narrow range of frequency. And you can check your tongue and see if your body is nice and sour in the mouth and healthy in the blood. If you're already too alkaline in your mouth, meaning 7.5, 7.6, 7.78, those pHs are so high that your body's already delivered the oxygen out of you, so there's no more oxygen you can deliver. So anybody whose pH is very high and alkaline, they cannot deliver oxygen. It has to be in a slightly acidic area. And that's why many nutritionists say take vitamin C, which is an acidic ascorbic acid, with your iron tablets to keep the iron in an acidic state so it can be better absorbed. Iron in the alkaline state is very poorly absorbed. So anybody with yeast infections, like I taught you last week, and molds and worms and viruses that have already sucked all the oxygen out of you, need to get rid of that biofilm so that you can move back into the more functional state of the oxygen curve so that you can get better oxygen penetration to your body. So remember, the trick is if your saliva or your urine is more alkaline than your blood, you've got a problem, okay? Now, many other people think that their body is too acidic, but if the blood is acidic, the gut becomes alkaline, vice versa. They're two compartments. And you can finger prick your blood and check the color density against a little density of color, and you can tell even out in the woods when you're not even near a laboratory. If you have these little cards, you can check how thick and dark is the hemoglobin in your blood or not. So basically, your job is for the body to squirt acid and alkaline in order to get the body somewhere in the middle so that your body can replump up its red blood cells into donut shape. If they go into acidic state, they go into sickle-like shape, or target cells. And these red blood cells that are unusual shapes don't fly around the capillaries at the hairpin turns of the fingertips and legs, leading to peripheral vascular disease, angina, poor blood flow to the heart, poor blood flow to the muscles, poor blood flow, etc. Now, also, I'll just mention in a minute or so, what happens if you have a bleeding disorder? Well, you're going to drop these red blood cells right out of circulation. Or what if you had a clotting disorder, such as the reported massive number of clots because of allergic reactions and venom and other components of polyethylene glycol and other things in recent vaccines? Well, these can clump up your blood and cause clots to form, and then there's no flow of blood when they're all too sticky together. Remember, we talked about the organ cushion, where your blood cells have to have a nice juicy organ of 70 millivolts between the inner cell and the outer cell. And in a normal cell, there's a nucleus, but in a red blood cell, that nucleus is gone unless you're a baby red blood cell. And that's how we tell if you have leukemia. If you start dumping out baby cells with a nucleus in them, and it says nucleated red blood cells, we know that you might be having fungus or bone marrow cancer or leukemia or lymphoma, because your body is just dumping out the wrong immature cells. So if you do see some people with strange looking cells, scalloped cells, target cells, hypochromasia, meaning low iron, or polychromasia, many different kinds of iron, or dark circles around their blood full of heavy metals, or if they have amoeba poisoning that sucks the other minerals out of you and it makes sort of raisin-like shriveled red blood cells. All of these things are visible on dark field microscopy, and we get an approximation of that when we use our Genius. Now, I wanted to mention also that if you have enough light in the cell and enough water and salt, you're going to carry the oxygen all through the body, right down to the mitochondria, where your DNA repair center reproduces the cells year after year, making new cells and longevity in your body. So I'm going to recap. If you're nice and reduced with hydrogen and you have good acid in the stomach, you remain usually very green and healthy. If you start getting heavy metals, molds, and allergic scum in your bloodstream, you basically start getting oxidized. Then you're a little bit in the yellow zone where you're not quite as perfect in that oxygen delivery curve. If you start having pesticides and hormones and viruses, worms, food poisoning, yeast, heavy metals, you really can get quite inflamed and move over into the alkaline gut syndrome, where the alkalinity is overwhelming the good acidity, and now the body is not on the pH of 7.4, it's 7.567. And now we're going to lead into stickier and stickier blood until you hit that right where my mouse is, right on the line between the upper and lower red and blue circle is the most dangerous location where we start clumping up and clotting. Once you've actually clotted here, and this is where pesticides, which are xenoestrogens, are. These estrogens and pesticides in our foods, the heavy metals, they make us very clumping. And now we can't get the circulation to a particular organ. So now we've got reduced oxygen, we've got alkaline body, and now we've got clots, poor circulation to the heart, poor blood sugar control for diabetes, poor oxygenation and starvation of the cell, leading to anaerobic metabolism, leading to cancers. So when you're using your genius, we're trying to prevent you from swinging to the right spin, and we're trying to spin you backwards towards the green, reduced, healthy digestive areas. So this is what it looks like under a microscope if that happens. You see this left-sided picture, it's called rouleau formation. This is when a normal red blood cell, which is a negative charge of negative oxygen, is lost its negativity, its electricity, and it becomes more positively charged or depleted and oxidized. So now all these positive charges clump together like a, you know, that Rolo, the chocolate Rolo bar, one stacked on another like coins and coins and coins. Now, can you imagine how much more poorly the surface area will be here? You won't be able to absorb much oxygen because there's no surface area available. Now, look at what happens 35 minutes after we put an amp coil on blood, and that coil has delivered hydrogen charges to make electricity flow. So now all these red blood cells start repelling away from each other, releasing their oxygen better. And also look at what's in between them. Look at all these little black splecks of all kinds of parasites that are causing that blood to be very parasitic. The white blood cell is not even very functional here. And the cells look very pale, like they don't look very full of oxygen. So these parasites could be schistosomiasis or blood sporozoas or protozoas or amoebas, and they're sucking all that magnesium, iron, tin, copper, sulfur, manganese, iodine out of your thyroid and out of your bone marrow to grow their colony, leading to a depleted mineral state. And this is why it's very hard for people to get over their parasites, is they just don't have enough minerals to fight back and bring the oxygen level way up to cause better resistance. So the point I'm trying to put out here is that we need some cardiovascular circulation in terms of a pumping pressure, which is the Krebs cycle, energizing your glucose, splitting it into ATP, NADH, and usable electrons. Those electrons fly along and recharge the enzymes in the body. The enzymes start processing and delivering fuels and fats to the mitochondria. Now, this is a very important thing I want you to memorize. Mitochondria fuel depends on fuel loading with chromium and magnesium as a cofactor that helps the insulin deliver the fatty acids into the mitochondrial furnace for burning. And then inside the mitochondria, the carnitine transport trucks, which many bodybuilders are using, that carnitine protein shovels the fuel like a shovel into the mineral-rich furnace to burn for energy. If you don't have chromium and magnesium due to a yeast infection, and you don't have carnitine due to a yeast infection, because yeast loves to multiply its colony on chromium, magnesium, and carnitine, then you will have poor energy development, poor energy delivery, and you're going to end up getting obesity or fatigue or poor circulation, and your cells are going to become starved and become acidic, inflamed, or degenerative. So one of the things that we talked about last week was preloading yourself with minerals and some amino acids before you start your sessions to give yourself the raw materials that you need for that. Now, the electrical conduction system of the heart is quite important. I want to just point something out to you, and that is that the heart has a right-sided electrical pacemaker chamber, okay, that goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated, and then it shoots it over to the rest of the body through the left ventricle, which is a bigger, fatter, thicker pumping station, and it has two sets of wiring and double thick walls and double the amount of arteries because it's twice as thick and it needs more flow, okay? Now, if you have no oxygen, what part of your heart is going to starve? Well, you could starve the inner lining of the heart called the endocardium, causing what's called a non-Q wave heart attack, where you're just suffocating slowly. You could suffocate the pacemaker up here in the top of the right atrium. If you had any conduction difficulties where the conduction wiring of the pacemaker is, it connects with a wire from the right atrium down into the AV node. Consider this is like a little pacemaker knob here, and it sends electricity over to the AV, atrial ventricular wall between the two chambers, and that sets off the bundle of His, one wire to the right and two wires to the left, to contract the heart all at once as a syncytial, big continuous muscle pumping all muscle fibers at the same time. Now, if you can imagine that if you starve the circumflex artery of the heart and it can't give any blood flow to the pacemaker, you're going to have an erratic blood rhythm or heart rhythm. You're going to have erratic contraction to the lungs. You won't fill up as much oxygen. You won't deliver it back to the left heart to pump around the body with this nice pink of blood. So your coronary arteries, especially the circumflex artery around the top of the heart for the pacemaker, the right coronary artery for the lungs, and the left coronary arteries for the left-sided chamber all depend on your oxygen delivery right at the source of your mouth, in your lungs, and how much hemoglobin you've got. So anything that's going to drop your hemoglobin is going to suffocate the coronary arteries, and it's going to also suffocate the delivery system of pumping it to the rest of the body, okay? And that's where we start getting into trouble. And I also should mention that inside the heart, we have now discovered magnetic features in the heart. So they are also connected to the magnetism of the earth. So the key is to get your circulation pump pressure up to have good flow around the body. And that means having good blood in the tank and good arteries, vessels, and capillaries in all of your muscles, and especially in the heart. And every muscle in the body is a distinct embryological origin that differs in frequency from every single other muscle in the body. And every muscle is separated by 2 hertz. I think that might be because it's 2 base pairs of a different DNA sequence. And then the heart pumps the more you fill it. So the more you preload it with fluids and the more you work it out, the better and stronger the heart becomes in efficient pumping. So you really can't really get anybody healthy without having any fitness whatsoever. I don't care if you're 90 years old sitting in a chair, you can still move your legs, move your arms, do something, do breathing, but you have to have some kind of exercise. And one of the best exercises in the entire world is called Tai Chi. It gives you breath control for conscious control of your psyche and your unconscious breathing at night. It gives you ability to move the body and tune it and tone the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, which is sympathetic and parasympathetic, and the peripheral nervous system. It also moves all your lymph and blood and capillaries, and it moves all muscles. In fact, the experts in Tai Chi, I think I've got 203 muscles in the body, and each Tai Chi exercise moves one different muscle. So if you really are an expert, you can learn all 203 muscles and develop optimal alignment, balance, coordination, and functional capacity. Now, I would like to mention that the blood is going to be sticky come heck or high water if you don't have good blood thinners in it. And that's called probiotics, which produce vitamin K2, K1, K2, K3 from vegetables and from fruits and foods, as well as you can take it as supplements. But if you don't have any vitamin K, you cannot co-factor the absorption of vitamin D, which is responsible for minerals. And I'm going to teach you every week how critically important the minerals are. But if you can't absorb your D to pull in the white blood cell monocytes and get all your sulfur and your zinc in your white blood cell immune system, you're not going to be able to defend yourself. So remember that probiotics have 2 things. They have prebiotics and probiotics. The prebiotics are the food of the probiotics so that they'll stay alive longer in your gut. They're called fructo, meaning fructose, oligosaccharides. And these are the things, and several of them like inulin, chicory, other fibers, these things help the good bacteria come along. In fact, I wanted to mention to you that it was discovered that women who breastfeed deliver maltose-like mannose sugars in their breast milk that do not feed their baby. They feed the probiotics in the baby's gut. So by breastfeeding a baby for 3 months, you're giving the mannose to create a new species of probiotic culture that then start producing all the vitamin K for the baby to resist infections and clot its blood properly and absorb the rest of the nutrition. This is why we ideally say women should breastfeed for 3 months till their babies can develop a nice enteric coating of a good biome. And if they don't, or are bottle fed, or they have antibiotics before the age of 3 months and knock out all the good species, these children tend to be allergic for the rest of their life. And if you're looking for a probiotic, try to get the enteric coated ones that aren't burnt up by the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, and use the multi-strain, because there's 11 different strains of probiotics that each do a different job. One of them absorbs vitamin K, one of them absorbs cobalt, one of them absorbs toxins, one of them helps blood clotting, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that there's many other lectures on that, especially from Dr. Jay Vandenheuvel. He's absolutely great on that topic. I also want you to look for live cultures of high dose so that they're living in you. And don't, leave it out on the counter and let them all die on the countertop, or else get travel version of probiotics that have the fructo oligosaccharides. So if you forget to put it in the fridge one night, you don't kill all the bacteria in the bottle. And you can always make your own by putting on a quart of milk on the countertop, put in 1 capsule or 2 capsules or even 3 of active culture from your acidophilus strains, and then cover it with saran wrap for 3 days, and it'll separate into the whey and the curd to make your own high potency, inexpensive probiotics. Remember, you can also get poor blood production if you're lacking in minerals like iron, copper, zinc, cobalt, manganese. You can get poor blood production if you have malnourishment. Many people have so many ulcers in the stomach they don't want to eat anymore, or bulimia from worms and they're not taking in the nutrition. Anything with a poor oxygen source, a bad working condition, a toxic fume, a heavy metal load in your lead poisoning from paint, or amalgams in your mouth, or other fumes and molds and dust. Anything that lowers your oxygen accessibility is going to lower your production of blood. And that's why I'm pretty much against wearing facial masks, which do nothing to prevent from microscopic transmission, and they do a lot to reduce oxygen flow. You can also have anemia from a loss of blood. So don't ever underestimate women who tell you they've had a lot of excessive menstrual flow difficulties. Metro meaning painful, and menorrhagia meaning many or much flow. So painful, heavy periods, very underestimated as a sign of a hypothyroidism, as a sign of uterine flukes, as a sign of sexually transmitted diseases, as a sign of, some other reason that they're not actually flowing well in their pelvis. And this can be devastating to people who are trying to get their energy up. Remember to look for peptic and gastric ulcers, because 45% of everybody you meet is going to have a food poisoning, an H. pylori, a gastric ulcer, a fluke, a worm, something, salmonella, shigella, something is going to cause most people to get a food poisoning once or so in their life, and you'll see that a lot on your scans. Also, ulcerative colitis from fungus and yeast growing in there, or amoebas, or people who are chronically constipated and they can't relieve themselves, especially people who are on morphine or painkillers who get constipated, or people who have worms, which are morphine addicts, and they constipate you as well. This could lead to hemorrhoids that can bleed bright red blood if it's just a recent bleed, or it could be darker, blacker blood if it's more chronic. Fissures in the rectum can be devastating to cause abscesses, and blood in the urine from too much high blood pressure, sexually transmitted diseases, kidney stones, gout, other things, and infections that lower your blood in general, or hypertension that make you, damage your blood, or especially cancers, which make you so tired that you lose your energy to produce your blood. So when you see people on that Genius program, when they say on that very first interview what kind of past history, make sure you click off as many boxes as you can, because that gives you the authority to speak with them as they've given you a pre-existing condition. And here's a couple of foods. Just the fructo-oligosaccharide rich foods are composed of short chains of fructose. They're usually a type of carbohydrate found in many plants, including blue agave, yacon root, garlic, onions, and leek. I just made a garlic onion leek and potato soup, and boy, did I feel great after that. Chicory root, which is often added to many supplements to help your digestion and absorption. Jerusalem artichokes are a fantastic way to clean the liver, the gallbladder, and the blood. Asparagus, rich in potassium. Bananas, also potassium rich, and they have some fibers in them, okay? So if you want to look that up, here's a little reference that you can check that out. But I think that realistically speaking, we're trying to get your oxygen up. Now, I'm going to briefly give you a little demo in a minute, but let's just quickly go over a couple other issues about sacred geometry. Oxygen is the note A on the piano, okay? And let me just play that for you. There's the note A on the piano. Oh. Okay, so when you're singing these bowls that they do, they're giving that 54 hertz subconscious stimulation of the oxygen stimulation. And when they put the note A on a cymatics oscilloscope, look at the shapes it takes. It's beautiful. It produces a derivative of the 432 hertz flower of life. It actually gives you the hexahedral formation of the inside of an electron. And it also gives you these other shapes that are very well seen throughout nature and throughout, you know, sacred geometry of buildings and architecture. And if you put the node A on, if you put little shavings of iron on a magnetic plate, which is what we're really doing when we're using the Genius program, we're adding a magnetic field into you, and then we're turning the frequency on that magnetic field into a particular frequency pitch. And then the body starts reorganizing itself in these very reliable patterns. And this is why I want you to understand that every single frequency gives a different pattern, a different shape. That's how your body can tell the difference between different chakras, different foods, different minerals. They all have a very unique frequency and therefore a very unique shape. And this is why many of the architectural patterns around the world have used these oxygen stimulating circular 432 hertz with the, you know, the hexahedral and the triangles and all of the elements that really mimic the sacred geometry of oxygen delivery. And I believe that the monks used to chant in these particular chanting bowls to get their congregations to chant like that, and also start increasing the oxygen levels in their own body. So this is why the universal note A can match almost every different wavelength based on how long a tube it's played through, like I'm trying to give the analogy here of a flute, but the sacred geometry of the note A is the key for us to listen to music in many symphonies in A. Almost all of the scales of music use the note A almost in some way or another in their tuning. And the piano itself is just separated by 7.83 hertz between every key on the piano, which is the frequency of Mother Earth. And if you multiply 7.83 and do its harmonics, the 54th harmonic of Mother Earth is oxygen at 54 hertz. And the 54th harmonic is 432 hertz, which is Earth. So oxygen is a derivative of Earth, and all of these different wavelengths of different channels in your body have to be respected, none more so than oxygen, because oxygen is going to interact with every single part of the rest of your entire body. So I just want to mention, last but not least, we have to remember that we are a heartbeat magnetic pulse. And by synchronizing to the most magnetic organ in your body, the heart, you can then synchronize the rest of all the other organs more easily. So when you're doing your Genius program, try to entrain the brain right off the bat with sacred geometry, with the node A, with the minerals, with good fluids, and then try to work on the central nervous system neurotransmitters in the heart, so that you're getting this powerful ability to entrain the body and start delivering the frequencies throughout the body. And I just wanted to mention that the melatonin from the brain is a powerful antioxidant that increases oxygen at night. The pineal gland releases dimethyltryptamine for hallucinations, visual colors, and dreaming, and universal access to the quantum field where you leave your body at night. And this is what happens when people get into a powwow and they all start chanting together and they're drumming together and their hearts are pumping together. And now we have this incredible entrainment, if you will, a biofeedback to the body to get all the hearts in harmony and all the collective consciousness of the tribe working towards the same end goal, which is to have perfect vibrational body. So this is what our goal is, to have the heart pumping up and down, the energy through the chakra system, the different minerals of different colors to capture that energy. Remember we talked last week, zinc is red, the tin is orange, the sulfur is yellow, the magnesium is green, the copper is light blue, the cobalt is dark magenta or dark cobalt blue, pardon me, and the manganese is magenta. And then our crown chakra is the combination of white light that comes through the whole rainbow of us. Without any minerals or water in that prism, you won't vibrate any of these colors very well, though, will you? So I do want you to follow Mother Nature, as we keep talking about, and using things that rewind you back to square zero. So I'm going to switch over to a little demo on how you might use your Genius program to try and wind the body back to the best oxygen and optimal alignment, okay? And next week, we're going to talk about the minerals. I won't go into that too much today, but there's so much to talk about minerals. I have to really take a whole hour on it next time, okay? Now, I'm just going to switch to the co-host myself, and I have a Genius program all queued up here. And screen share. Okay, screen share. Thank you, Denise, for teaching this. Okay, so by the way, folks, you know, Denise and the other technicians, they do fantastic trainings on Thursdays. If you need to get some more navigational skills, please make sure you tune in on that day to get, you know, especially for you newbies. But I'm learning. I mean, all of us could continue to learn how to navigate with nuances. Okay. Now, when you're going to put an affirmation in here, you know, I don't know if I could be so pedantic, but I do have my favorite affirmation. Where is it here, Joe? Sorry, I just wanted to write it in. I usually have it off the top of my head. Well, the fastest way is to say all frequencies are transmuted to love. Okay, that's one of the easiest ways. But one of my friends made up this little poem, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to type it in there so you guys can hear it. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. Whoops, I got to type it on the tablet. Sorry. Okay, so today is the first day of the rest of my life. I am excited that I will know more about myself. I'm trying to open up their brains to be receptive, okay? Sorry, about myself, and be on my path to wellness. And I know I'm being a bit long-winded here, but just let me go forward. Knowledge will give me the freedom to move forward, okay? And that's a lot of people are afraid to look at their scans. Knowledge will give me the freedom to move forward. This is what we want. We want people moving forward, not backwards into their old habits. My lifestyle, and you can't talk to anybody about coaching without talking about their lifestyle, will assist in the way I feel. And here's the most important, I am the steward of my own health. I believe that we've given our power away to the medical profession, and they didn't know what they were necessarily doing at the basics of physiology. And somehow our whole world's got so far off track. We have to get the power back into the hands of individuals. Okay. So when you have your genius program, you're supposed to be taking care of yourself first. Remember, put the oxygen mask on when the plan is going down, then you teach others. So I want you to do all of these same things on yourself to keep yourself in your best shape possible so that you become a walking example of good coaching. Okay. So we're talking about circulation, and last week we talked about the fact that if you really wanted to do things in a hurry, you could just go up to the quick zap button, right? You could actually just say, look, and I don't know where all my vitamins and minerals are. Last week we did it by hand, but in this week you could just put the red items and the blue items onto your quick tray, right? And as I've just learned, just hitting the timer here. Oops, let me get it out of there. Oh, sorry, I keep going trying to redo it on my screen. As you can see, putting the timer down to a very small amount just for the sake of demonstration. I'm just going to put it on there for a minute, okay? But I do want you to notice that the sacred geometry, the perfect tuning notes, the consciousness notes, the spiritual order, and I'm not sure if we can see the rest of this. I can't quite go down on the page there. Any gasoline and solvents, any poisons, toxins, anything that might be bothering the body. If you just give that 1 minute zap, right, then we will be able to have a chance for your body to get the basic raw materials of building blocks of the minerals, the sacred geometry, and you can go in there one thing at a time if you wish, right? Last week, we talked about how important it was to have minerals, hydration, neurotransmitters. You can also make sure that you go to the sacred geometry and you can pull up the Fibonacci sequence. You can pull up the flower of life. You can pull up the A note and that sacred geometry. You can, and remember, why are we doing all that? We're trying to create, as we talked last week about the bubble, we want that quantum field around us in order to actually to accomplish the job, right? No, I don't want to exit. Now, of course, the other thing is that I wanted to just make sure you guys do see that the sacred geometry button here, it does ask for the flower of life. That is a sign that somebody may be needing oxygen. Right triangles and circles, all of those things. You know, the more you look into the details, you go down the rabbit hole. And when you're coaching, sometimes you don't have time to look at every single angle on every single thing. And it's easy to use the top reds and the bottom zones or even the yellow zones, okay? But if you look at the bottom sections, these are the parts that tend to be the most troublesome because they're the most exhausted. So a fractal pattern that's missing, or the fiber not, oops, better go back a page there, sorry. Fibonacci. That's the spiral of life we've been talking about for a few weeks. The platonic solids we talked about. I'm touching too hard, apparently. So as much as you want to do and as little as you want to do, don't forget that the sacred geometry, when setting up, is the bowl upon which you're putting in the cake mix to mix everything. So do try to start with that sacred geometry early on for the optimal ability for oxygenation. Now, you know that there's going to be a lot to be said about oxygen under the section called amino acids and or organs. I also wanted to just mention here that the vitamins for oxygen would be vitamin B12 or cobalt. And when you see any of the B vitamins missing, you can't run the Krebs cycle. So when is it ever harmful to give all the vitamins? Never. So instead of wondering and wandering around which ones, for time's sake, put the red, the yellow, the green, and the blue items and just get all the vitamins on the tray so that you as the baker have enough of the raw materials to bake the cake. Now, what if you looked at the vitamin K here? I just want to mention it. That's where it is, okay? Vitamin K is for the blood clotting. And this is very, very important that if it's missing, we're in deep trouble. And if vitamin D is missing, you're going to be in deep trouble. So if you can't take the time to go and do all the minerals, at least do D, K, and C. But I'm going to say to you over and over again, why would you want to do a couple when you can do them all, right? It only takes a second to do. Now, the third thing about blood is you need the heart to pump, right? You've got to have the actual vessels. So when you go back down here, and I will go to infections in a minute because it looks here like they're overdone here. So any infection that's going to suck oxygen out of you is a liability no matter how you slice it. And the stress markers are the ones that cause the most difficulty. So I'm going to just quickly go to the heart. Now we do see the lungs, brain, and bladder here. And in this case, oops, sorry. You know, the heart is not so bad, but it is under a score of 100 here. So again, for the sake of, just for teaching sake, I'm going to show you the reds, the greens, and the blues. I'm going all full on, full enchilada there, okay? And remember, it's only 10 seconds an item. So if it's something stuck, it's going to come up problematic even after that. So we've got the circulation, we've got the vessels. And one other thing that I would just like to say is the most common cause of difficulty in under-recognized is the spinal energy for all of the arteries to all the organs. So if your spine is misaligned, there's no axle, it's very difficult to get the blood flow to all the organs. So I tend to use the spinal energy pretty early on. And in this case, the hormones, well, let's just peek at what hormones are problematic. And we see the thyroid hormone. And if you see that on top, you know the person can't get minerals. And then if they have any infection in the body, their histamine will be high. So no matter what, as soon as you see a high histamine and a high hormone problem, there's probably a thief in the hotel, because the human being is designed, right, in order to have, I'm going to take all the reds and the blue items here. Okay, now that's quite a few items here. We got 61 items on the scanner now. So for the sake of argument, let's do a quick balance and see what the body says about all that. Whoops, wait a second. Didn't get that cancel button off there. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a primer like we did last week, where I'm saying, if this person came in with stress, if they came in with any vascular disease, you need to sort of have themes in your mind. If you're going to work on the gut, there's a few things that you always want to do. If you're going to work on the circulation, there's always things. If you're going to work on excretion, there's always things. But no matter what, all of those things always depend on the 3 vectors of bioterrain, which is oxygen, minerals, and water.
I don't think you're running the progressive insight, if that's what you wanted to run.
I was just going to prime them for 1 minute there.
But you're doing the system overview page, I believe. I don't think you're in the main whole tray.
I did the bottom whole tray.
Right, but you pressed the wrong play button, I think.
Okay, well, I'll just stop that. You want me to go to system overview now?
No. Main hold tray is
that's what I was doing.
Right above the red banner.
Yeah, that's what I was using there.
Yeah, but it would be in the progressive insights. You're on system overview.
Okay, maybe I did that wrong. Just let me go check that out. But I don't want the timer to go up to 30 minutes here.
Right.
If I just hit the play.
Yeah, now you're in progressive insights. So
Okay.
now you have to, there you go. And so now you have to move the timer all the way to the left for
Okay,
however long.
let me just take that timer back. Yeah, thank you for that little tip. Thank you, coach.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now you know, do you want to do the highs and the lows and the mediums and the slows? Well, again, you can look around, but you've already taken the time, as you have before this, to get going on sorting this out. So I tend to set the session up as quickly as I can. Then I let the client sit there and relax for as long as possible without constantly going into their mind consciously saying, oh, you got this wrong, you got that wrong, oh, you got this and that. So by the time they start the session, the client's kind of, I got all those things wrong with me, oh my goodness, and they maybe get a bit contracted in fear. So typically I try to get as much as I can on the primer done quickly for the basic raw ingredients. Then I do some sorting as to what's their priorities. And then I get the best of both worlds. I got my priorities up front and I got their priorities. That's what gives a satisfied customer. I don't want the customer coming in and saying, I only want this, but I'm seeing a gaping hole somewhere else on them, right? So you want to make sure that you have both sides of that. Now, I know that there may be some questions here, and I know that's a lot to cover, but I wondered if maybe there's any questions from the floor that you'd like to ask me for this last 7 minutes or 8 minutes that we have left in the class. Is there anybody? I'm going to open up my chat box. What are the functional zone considerations? The functional zone considerations, I believe, means that do you mean like the yellow, green, and red? This is what I'm trying to explain.
You want me to touch on that a little bit?
Well, what I would like you to say is that the numbers are relative to each other, but they're defined on the stress level that is imparted. So the green zones are healthy, the yellow ones are slightly stressed, the red zones are overactive, and the blue zones are underactive. It doesn't mean diseased, but it means relatively, if something is inflamed, it's going to have more oxygen, more red blood flow into it, and more red zones. Okay, so that's something that's usually more recent, more acute, or more inflamed. Whereas something that's sunk down below 200 score, it's a lower resonance vibration from their voice print, and therefore it's a lower mineral, oxygen, or vector component, suggesting that they're more depleted, more exhausted, or run out of fuel, or shall we say, run out of energy in that zone.
Uh,
Now, it doesn't mean that they can't flip top to bottom very quickly, because as soon as you give a lot of minerals, you may change something from a low zone to a high zone.
Deb,
And it's important that you don't say to the person you have a disease here, because as you'll see in 1 minute, it can change quite drastically.
Deb,
Yeah.
just to interrupt, I'm sorry. The functional zone considerations, though, what they were asking is like, if you hit that, you go into another screen. It's a whole other screen. And basically, I could just read to you for a minute what it's described as. The functional zone is considered the final step during your balancing session. It provides a summary of the finding as it relates to the 7 main functional zones. The functional zones create a context so that when you are looking for the progressive insight results, you can then associate these primary findings with the functional zone. Think of the functional zone as a secondary finding to clarify all the progressive insight results. And then and I'm just going to skip forward. The different functional zones would be psychogenetic zone, and underneath that, it would come up like depressive tendency stress or shock stress, miasm stress, hormone stress, interference zone, scar stress. You have an immune zone, and under that you have food allergy stress. So the way in which you get to that is if you want to pick a specific item on this progressive insights, you would check one of those boxes on the left-hand side, not on the right-hand side where it says high, medium, and low, but on the left-hand side. We can't do it now because it's going to stop the
That's
the
an
function.
excellent point. That's an excellent
then-
point. I think that we should actually almost do a whole session on that in more detail.
Well,
maybe
I
in one week.
covered that a little bit in my Thursday live last
Okay.
week. So if anybody wants to go and check out the YouTube link for that, it's towards the end of that video, and I can go over it again on Thursday if everybody would like that.
Okay, great.
So
So you're
hope that
basically
helps.
saying that we've got multiple tools to go down the rabbit hole and to see how well our efforts have improved and whether there's still lingering areas. And that's where, as a coach, you want to make sure that things are in a flow state and they're moving. If everything is stuck in the same position, this may be a time for a deeper dive, as she says, by clicking one of these left click buttons. And then I presume, that black box here, right? The functional zone consideration.
Yeah, down on the bottom. And also V just chatted, and I was going to mention that too. The timer is on 0 minutes, so it's not going to go off unless you hit it. So
Yeah.
I don't know
Let's
if you
just
still
stop
want
that for now then and just have a little peek at that.
but it is 1:57, just so
Yeah,
you're
we're
aware.
coming on the top of our hour. So perhaps rather than jumping to, okay, so just as what she's saying is, say we wanted to pick on brain here, we would unselect all of these, I presume.
No, you don't have to unselect anything. You
Oh,
could
you can
leave.
just pick one?
You see the boxes on the left.
Yeah,
So just click the brain.
okay.
No, you just passed it.
I'm just gonna pick heart, just because I wanted to
Okay.
talk about heart.
And now
And-
hit functional zone consideration, the black banner on the bottom.
Okay. So again, the ability as a coach to do the wide angle lens is only the first step of setting up the basket upon which then you need to go in and fix the areas that are most difficult. So here we see there are various different parts of this heart, microorganism issues, interference, and psycho. So, oops.
So where'd you go? Are you okay?
So what I would do, I would just drag those down onto my whole bar.
Well, no, because it's still going to give you more information. So, I mean, running out of time here, I would either look at geophysical zone or immune zone, since that's under 200. Or whichever zone you think you would like to look into. Well, what did you click on again? Heart. So do you want to look at like biochemical zone?
Well, this is a great way to determine if somebody's got a heartache. I have a very interesting case this week. Somebody whose family got vaccinated. She did not. She's now in the hospital with a heart attack and a stroke. I'm trying to figure out if she's actually got emotional heart attack or she's physically got a heart attack. So you could, for instance, look at the psychogenic zone versus the physical or the infectious part of the heart and try to decide what is the stress on that particular organ that's causing such difficulty.
Yeah. So, I mean, just pick one, and then it's going to tell you what other like categories could be causing it, and it gives you a percentage. So,
So I
I
just
only
picked the
use-
psychological zone there for a second to see what it has to say.
right.
Now, remember, psychology causes you to hold your breath. Holding your breath causes acidosis, and acidosis causes difficulty. So here we do see a nice little deep shock. Now, can I treat that from here?
Yeah, you can drop those down into the main hold tray.
Okay. Right on. Excellent. So now we have, you know, the heart is a very big magnet, and it can get depressed, and a lot of people have been isolated and having, you know, other reasons for being sad. So, you know, try to customize this. Your job as a coach is to look at yourself in detail, learning how to use all these modules and find out where things are hidden. And then you are able to actually pull it up on the dime when you need it. Okay. So that's a really excellent tip you've given us there today, Denise. I really appreciate you jumping in there and giving us a little bit of extra deep digging. You know, we all need to learn that this is a process of learning the genius. It has 200 different specialties of medicine, over 400 years of science in it. So you can't learn it all exactly in the first day you get it. But if you want to go autopilot, we've given you the abilities to choose by the color-coded systems that are well known and well physiologically supported by science. Okay. So on that
It
note,
is too.
pardon?
I said it is too. So just
Yeah, I'm going to
keeping you
stop the
on
class
schedule.
here. I just want to thank you all for participating today, and I'll be back next week with a talk on minerals. Just want to also mention to you that tonight I start my 12-hour continuous course called Music is Medicine for the Canadian College of Humanitarian Medicine. I put the link in your Mighty Networks if any of you, a couple of you have wanted to sign up for my class. And there's instructions on how you can have certification towards you becoming an integrated health steward or humanitarian health stewardship program. And that is with the Canadian College of Humanitarian Medicine, where I'm a bioenergetic instructor. So I hope I'll see a couple of you in the class. And if not, I'll be drip feeding that course to you over the coming months here with the help of Denise and Kayla and other ways that we can sort of give you little bits of new information every week to get you to be the strongest and best coaches you can be. So on that note, unless anybody else has any other comments, you will have our recording of this put back into our Mighty Networks session, and I'll put the PowerPoint in there as well. And hopefully that'll give you some things to chew on. And on that note, I'd like to just wish you all God blessings. Please be good to yourselves and go out there and flow some happiness.
Bye, guys.
Bye for now, folks. Take care. See you next time.